Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from ejsllc.com. This video is going to be a little adventure in the home lab as I try to work with Ubuntu 20.10 and the Ubiquiti Unifi Controller. Before I dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who hasn't subscribed yet to make sure you click that subscribe button and ring the bell when you do. And also for anyone, if you enjoy the content of the video, make sure that you click like. So in my home lab, I'm wanting to do a little bit more stuff with Ubuntu server and Debian-based operating systems. And the reason being for that, pretty much all of my training has been in the Red Hat realm, which isn't a bad thing, but I figure as a system administrator, it would behoove me to be familiar with more than just the Red Hat ecosystem of Linux operating systems. So I figured it would make sense to do some stuff with Ubuntu. And on that, rather than just do something abstract, I figured why not do a little project where I'm actually making something that would be useful in real life. So I have a Ubiquiti wireless access point, and so I figured let's make a Unifi controller, and we'll also use Ubuntu 20.10 since that's the most recent version of the operating system. Well, what seemed like should be a pretty straightforward project ended up having some headaches and such, so I figured I would share with you the process and show you what I dealt with as far as the problems that came up, and then show you how I solved them. So if you want to do this in your own home lab, you'll have a little bit of a guide to it. Do note that I don't go into the configuration of a Unifi controller, but rather this is just getting it installed to where you can configure it, which I was able to do once I had it installed. But for this video, we're just going to hit the installation. So let's dive in. So dealing with the Unifi controller for Ubuntu 20.10. Well, first of all, I actually have a Fedora workstation here, but we will be using an Ubuntu server. And the first thing that I've done just as a preparation for the lab is I have added something to my etc host file. And that is the IP address of what we'll be using for the Unifi server. Just makes life a little bit easier when I'm trying to ping stuff or just go to its web page. So if you're not familiar with how to get the Unifi controller, it is completely free. And note that this is not the only way to do it. There's a way that I actually uses apt and such, but I decided to get the most recent file and such. So you can search for setting up a Unifi network controller. This is what we're going to be using for our initial instructions, which is what I did when I first worked with this, and then I had to alter it and such. So we'll go to how to do this, and then we'll go to the Linux part. So the first thing we do, we have to download it, and we go to their download page, and we will find under Unifi their controller software. So to download that, we have to agree to their terms. And then you can either download the file or get the URL. I'm just going to get the URL because I'm just going to download it directly on my server. So let me go back to Bash. Now I'm actually going to SSH into what will be our Unifi server. We're going to go into the temp directory, and we're going to wget that URL. After a few seconds, we have the Unifi sysv deb file available to us. So going back to the original page, so what it tells us to do is download the controller using wget, and we're going to do sudo dpkg-i and the deb file. So let's do just that. So sudo dpkg-i and the deb file. Put in my sudo password. This will take just a minute or so. And it looks like some stuff was done. It's complaining about some dependencies, which makes sense when you're using dpkg as well as RPM in the Red Hat world. It does not handle dependencies for you, and it's complaining about mongodb and Java, it looks like, and also bin utils. So if we go back to the instructions, it tells us download the controller, install it. It says if you get an error about missing dependencies, or if an error about missing dependencies is received, do the following command. So apt-get install -f to solve. All right, so let's try that. sudo apt get install -f because we did get dependencies. All right, and it looks like these will be installed. The bin utils will be installed, and following packages will be removed. Unify, that doesn't sound good. So let's go ahead and press Y. This is a lab after all, and we have labs to break stuff and to learn, right? So after a few moments, that finishes. Let's clear the screen again, and installation complete. So, and it tells us how we can check for the service and such. So notice sudo service is a bit old because we live in systemctl land now, but I can do systemctl status unify. It tells us that it's inactive and it's masked. I'm not 100% sure what masked means, but it says it's inactive, it's dead. So to fix this, it says, we can start the service. Let's see what happens when we try to start the service. Let me sudo for that, and it failed to start it because the service is masked. And just to make sure, let's follow the instructions of go to the IP of controller host, which I don't need to do that since I have my host file. And let's just see what happens here. So https unify 8443, and it can't find anything, which makes sense because the service hasn't started. So from the instructions here, this failed, and it is failing because of dependencies. One thing that I like doing in my lab is, especially if I'm just starting to learn something, if it fails, I will usually blow away the VM and start over, just to where I'm on a clean slate rather than just like continuously picking at something and then something finally works and you're, oh yay, it worked, but you don't know what you did to get that. So I'm going to pause for just a moment and revert a snapshot on the VM, and then we'll get back to it with the troubleshooting. And we're back. So I've done a snapshot revert, which takes us back to a fresh install state for our server, and I've also SSH'd back into it. So the issue of dependencies are a problem since we're using dpkg. One thing that you would think that is kind of an obvious troubleshooting step is let's install all of the dependencies beforehand. So let's try that. So we'll do sudo apt install, and it was complaining about JSVC if I recall. It also complained about Java 8, which doing this on my own, I remember the package name that I need for that. So openjd k8jre. We're going to do headless so we don't get a bunch of extra stuff that we don't need. It also complained about bin utils. And the last thing was mongodb. So let's start with just installing these things first. I'm just going to do -y, and after a moment, these will be installed. All right, so everything installed thus far, but we still have the MongoDB to deal with. So what I did initially when I was trying this was I tried to install Unifi Controller without MongoDB and follow the instructions from Unifi, and it wasn't that successful, so let me show you what that would look like. So what I'm going to do here is clear the screen. Let us go ahead and download the file again. I'm going to go to the temp directory, wget, download that. So we've satisfied all of the dependencies except MongoDB, and let's see what happens. All right, and it has failed, and we expected this because it's still complaining about these packages here, which we expected. Notice that it's not complaining about bin utils, it's not complaining about Java anymore. It's just these particular packages. So what I'm going to do is copy this into a text file. All right, so for these packages, let's see if we can install them. So sudo apt install mongodb. We'll try server. All right, and it can't find it. Oh, wait, I did mongodb. Let's try mongodb. So it's saying it's not available, but it's referred to by other packages. All right, so let's try mongodb 10gen. A lot of times, a package will depend on other packages, and getting one of these three might pull anything else that we need. So we have the same thing there. And so the other was mongo-org-server. Okay, same thing. So we aren't able to get this from the actual repositories. So the question becomes, where can we get MongoDB? The way we can get that, and there may be other ways, is go to the actual MongoDB site itself. Now, I know that MongoDB had some licensing changes, I think in the last year or so. It may have been longer, that basically makes it pretty difficult to get a free version of MongoDB, but they do have a community version, which in my testing I have found has worked well with what we need. So just like everything else, let's get the most current version. So 4.43 is current, and we are doing this on Ubuntu, not ARM, but I don't think they have a 2010. Oops, I'm scrolling too far here. Yeah, they don't have an Ubuntu 2010, but they do have Ubuntu 20.04. So we'll grab that. And of the packages, I went ahead and got the server package, and we're going to copy the link, and let's download that. Okay, so we have this downloaded. Let's go ahead and install. We'll use dpkg to install this. See what happens. So after a moment, it installs MongoDB, and actually looks like it made a new user and such for it. I'm just curious if I were to systemctl status MongoDB. There's no service for it. All right, it might be called something else. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But the thing is, it installed. Now, there weren't any specific instructions on Ubiquiti's site as far as what to do. So just in my own lab, just poking around, since I'm not too familiar with dpkg, I just decided to try to install the Unifi Controller again, just to see what would happen. And it says that it's unpacking it on top of the other one, which I expected. And here it tells us that these two are not installed, but the org server is 4.4.3. And it's still complaining about dependencies. And the dependency that it's complaining about is the server has to be less than 4.0.0. So this actually is something, even though I did this in my lab, I just now realized. I ended up having to go to Dr. Google, and I found a blog post that basically solved the mystery as far as handling this particular thing here. And in retrospect, I wish I had seen this before, because I probably could have got it figured out before having to look at Dr. Google. But this is really what the problem is. And what's happening is dpkg and the information within the Debian packages saying that Mongo org server has to be less than 4.0.0. So I would imagine one way to possibly be able to solve this, and let's see if we can get that actually from their site, 4.0.0. Oh, we could go to 3.6 it looks like, but nothing that's 4.0.0. What I ended up doing for my own lab is getting it to where dpkg is not going to care about the version of mongodb-org-server. I'm not sure if I would do this necessarily in a production environment, but I do think it's good to be using the most recent things. So what I'm going to do is revert the snapshot and show you kind of the final version of what I did to be able to get this to install in my lab, which is going to take care of this problem here with the server version. And we are back again. So this is going to be kind of the final steps that I took to be able to get the Unifi Controller installed in my lab. We're going to, first of all, install all of the dependencies we can via apt again. And I went ahead and downloaded the deb files as needed for the install process. So sudo install, or sudo-i, sudo apt install, then JSVC, open JDK 8, JRE headless, bin utils-y. And in just a moment, this will install. So then we will manually install the MongoDB package. That'll take just a moment or so. That's a pretty quick install. And now lastly, we will install the Unifi package, but we're going to have to do something first to tell it to basically ignore the dependency requirement for mongodb-org-server, because remember, it's only going to accept versions older than 4.0.0. So to do that, we'll do sudo dpkg --ignore depends equals the package name, so mongodb-org-server, then -i for install, and then the Debian file. And after a couple of minutes, it finishes. And notice that we see create a symlink here for multi-user target once. And that's obviously a good sign because that's basically enabling a service. If we were to do systemctl status unify, we see that the service is running. And if we go back to our browser here, we try to reload the Unify page, this should, it's going to complain about assert. This should work. And now we're here and we're ready to configure the controller. So it's now been installed. There's one other step, and I bemoaned just a moment ago about not seeing not noticing the feedback from DPKG the very first time, and it talking about the dependency. I talked about going to a blog post, which again I'll link in the description of the video. But there was one step actually from that blog post that is very useful for this. So in the future, I would imagine if you're trying to do future installs and such, you're going to need to explicitly tell DPKG to not worry about this particular dependency. I'm not sure if you'd necessarily want to do this in a production environment, but at the same time, I think it's generally good to use the most up-to-date applications and such. And since this is for a lab environment, why not? But that step that they had us do in the blog post is sudo vi, and we're going to edit, see if I can remember the path off the top of my head. It should be var lib dpkg and status file. Yep. All right, and then we're going to search for package. I'm searching by doing the /unify. And what we're going to do is go into edit mode and press I to do that with VI. You can probably do this in Nano as well, but VI is just faster for me. This depends line is really just one big line that's like a couple of hundred characters long. And we're simply going to get rid of that requirement. And so this shouldn't cause problems in the future. And of course, famous last words in IT, should, right? That should be everything that you need to be able to install the Unify controller on Ubuntu 20.10. Now, one thing that I've done, just because I like working with some scripting as well, and I'll link this in the description. If you were to go to my GitLab page, so gitlab.com/EddieJennings, and then go under the Personal Projects tab, and you'll find one, should be, I think it's near the top actually. Maybe it's done by, Ubiquiti. I've made a script that basically does everything that's in the video. And I have a couple of other checks as well, but it's going to download the particular deb files. It'll install the dependencies, then install the mongodb dev, then install Unify, and then prompt you to make a change to that var lib dpkg status file as well. Now this, and I have a little warning here, be careful before you do it in production. This isn't really much of an automation. You're going to have to manually make sure that your URLs and file names and such are right. But if you're not wanting to just manually go through the steps and would just like a script to do it, you can check that out at the GitLab page. So I hope that you found this helpful. In particular, if you're working in your home lab, and if you're ever frustrated about something's just not working right, and do I suck? Am I just a terrible person? Am I bad with my home lab? No. People that have home labs are doing this pretty much all the time. You want to try something, and if it doesn't work, you're having to do troubleshooting and such. So I figured I'd give you a video kind of showing the troubleshooting process as well as the solution to how to do this in your home lab. Again, I want to thank the returning subscribers for watching another video, and I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch. And if you have not subscribed yet, make sure you click that subscribe button and ring the bell. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you click like and feel free to share with others. Also, feel free to leave comments as well, in particular if there are ways to improve this method, or if you have used the apt method, whereas you're adding a couple of repositories to apt to just be able to do apt install Unify. If you're able to do that with Ubuntu 20.10, I'm curious to hear in the comments if you've done that successfully, because I'm all about knowing more than just one way to solve a problem. Or if you want to leave any other comments, you're free to do that too. Again, thanks for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you the next time.